They found his teeth before they found his name. The tide licked the pilings and the wind carried sirens like wolves. Detective Ryan Cole studied the blood glittering on wet concrete, and the night looked back without mercy. FBI agent Maya Reed said, "No wallet and a message in pieces." Ryan said, "The message screams marrow." The text zipped the bag and the zipper sounded like a verdict. A gull shrieked and the bridge hummed like a low prayer. Maya traced a crimson arc that pointed toward the river stairs. She said, "Dumped fast and staged cleaner than it looks." Ryan said, "Someone wanted us to read it and choke." The city held its breath as if the river could keep secrets forever. A rookie puked in the shadows and wiped his mouth with a shaking hand. The whisper moved through the tape and into the radios and into the bones. The Marrow's Syndicate had spoken without words. Dawn found the station windows streaked with salt and rumor. Ryan studied the board where nameless victims became pins and string. He felt the old ache in his hands, where bad nights never left. Maya read the coroner text, and the words felt colder than the slab. Maya said premortem extraction and stage trauma. Ryan said he was made into a warning. The captain walked past without slowing, and the hallway air turned sharp. Ryan remembered a visit to a prison where his brother tried to smile. He pictured a clock with no hands because time meant nothing to grief. Maya thought about a face she failed to save, and the echo kept walking behind her. She said, "We go in and we do not blink." Ryan said, "We go in and we do not break." The board stared back like a locked door that wanted a key made of blood. Captain Diane Hart called them in and closed the door with a quiet click. Captain Diane Hart said, "The Bureau signs off on full immersion and I carry the fallout." Ryan watched her face and saw a ledger of hard years. Maya folded her hands and kept her fear where it could not be seen. She said, "We build clean names and dirty habits." Ryan said, "We play small until the right ears listen." Hart slid 2 folders across the desk, and the paper smelled like burned coffee and risk. She said, "You will meet a broker who launders for marrow." Ryan felt the floor tilt the way it does on boats and funerals. Maya felt the old ghost step into the room and sit down between them. Hart said, "You will not be heroes if you come back." The clock ticked like a distant hammer, and the city waited. The first breadcrumb lived behind a tire shop where the air tasted like rubber and lies. A broker named Lyle counted cash with fingers that never trembled. Lyle said, "You want a wash, you bring clean stories for dirty bills." Ryan said, "We sell parts and move fast when night pays better." Maya watched the cameras above the exit and read the blind spots like a map. Tight. The shop bay doors breathed in diesel and spit out heat. A black SUV idled, and someone inside never looked up. Lyle smiled without warmth and slid a phone across the counter. Maya said, "We answer to the name Carter now." Ryan said, "We answer to nothing when it hurts." The rain began again, and the gutters sang. Somewhere a church bell marked noon and sounded like a warning dressed as mercy. That night, they burned their old phones in a coffee can behind the precinct. The smoke smelled like endings and cheap plastic. Ryan said, "If I call you, it means run or bleed." Maya said, "If I call you, it means choose the mission over me." They practiced their cover names until the syllables felt like skin. The handler packet listed rules that sounded simple and lived like knives. Ryan stared at a faded photo of a boy who still believed in rescue. Maya folded a note to herself that read, "Do not forgive," and tucked it away. The city lights blinked like tired eyes trying to stay open. Somewhere the syndicate counted money and waited for new friends. "Mo?" Ryan said, "We cross the river at dawn." Maya said, "We burn the boat behind us." The can glowed and dimmed, and the night swallowed the sparks. The visiting room smelled like bleach and swallowed hopes. Ryan Cole watched his brother pick up the phone and pretend his hands did not shake. Ethan Cole said, "You still chasing ghosts, man?" Ryan said one of them bit back. The glass held their reflections like a cheap lie that no one believed. Ryan remembered backyard summers, before sirens learned their address. Ethan said, "They want me broken by winter." Ryan said, "Winter can wait." A guard coughed, and the clock smirked as minutes turned mean. Ryan pressed his palm to the glass, and felt nothing but cold. He promised with his eyes because promises with words die fast, in places like this. Ethan said, "Do not trade your soul for my sentence." Ryan said, "My soul left when they chained you." The handset clicked like a small door closing. Ryan walked out with a bigger storm than he brought in. Maya Reed stood in an alley, where an informant bled out 2 years ago. She recited the street like a confession, and let the rain rinse nothing. Maya said, "I told you I would pull you out." Memory said, "You were late." She replayed the call, and the silence that followed. Captain Diane Hart stepped from the curb and watched without judgment. "Hart," said, "guilt is a leash, not a compass." Maya said, "Then I will choke on it until it leads me right." A bus roared by and threw filthy water across their shoes. Hart said, "You want clean? Pick another city." Maya said, "I want true." A siren grazed the block and faded like a bad prayer. She placed a white carnation by a scar in the brick, and did not blink. The city listened without mercy, and kept her secret anyway. Ava Morrow poured tea in a house where rooms whispered in Italian and English. Don Vincent Morrow studied his daughter like a ledger with missing pages. Vincent Morrow said, "Family is the safest prison." Ava Morrow said, "Then give me parole." A portrait stared down from a gold frame and refused to blink. A boy laughed in the next room, and the sound tried to soften the walls. Vincent said, "You were born to keep what I built." Ava said, "I was born to live." He turned his ring, and the gem caught the light like a warning. She slipped a folded resume into her coat, and chose to breathe anyway. A maid entered, and silence put its mask back on. The tea cooled and tasted like surrender. Ava smiled, but it was a blade wrapped in silk. Nick Russo kept a scar under his collar the way some men keep faith. He remembered a warehouse fire and a voice that promised backup, then silence. "Nick Russo," said loyalty, "is a debt with no ceiling." A junior soldier said, "The cops breathe on our necks." Nick said, "Let them smell smoke." He tightened a shipment schedule and folded the night into precise edges. He did not drink before jobs because memories stagger better when sober. A burner phone buzzed and delivered a location without a signature. Nick said, "We move the cash and the fear together." Tires hissed on rain, and an engine refused to stall. He checked a pistol he rarely needed, and always carried. The scar itched when storms came near. The storm was already here. Ryan Cole and Maya Reed sat in a diner where the coffee tasted like old bullets. They spoke in codes that could pass for small talk. Maya said, "Our broker wants proof of muscle and manners." Ryan said, "We will give him both." The waitress topped their cups and pretended not to hear the static in their breathing. Ryan studied exits and counted mirrors. Maya tracked every wristwatch like it was a fuse. A song from a broken decade crackled out of a tin speaker. Ryan said, "If I freeze, melt me." Maya said, "If I drift, anchor me." They paid cash and left a tip too large for 2 ghosts. Outside, the night dragged its raincoat and grinned. They walked to the curb and did not look back. The city shrugged and moved the pieces for them. The tire shop's back lot steamed like a throat after shouting. Lyle counted rubber-scented bills and watched their eyes the way snakes watch birds. Lyle said, "You want in, you carry weight that bites back." Ryan Cole said, "We carry, and we bite harder." Maya Reed read the sightlines and clocked 3 exits, and one man who was already thinking about running. A duffel hit the hood, and it rang like a bell for the doomed. Lyle said, "Delivery in 20, no police air, No tales, no chatter. Maya said, "We deliver silence first." A kid flashed a pistol to measure their nerves, and Ryan never blinked. The rain started slow and turned the asphalt into a mirror where liars looked honest. They walked away with money and a memory shaped like a fuse. The city moved aside as if it respected nothing but nerve. The proof of muscle came in a basement that smelled like bleach and coins. A debtor mouthed off at the wrong table, and the room waited for a story written in bone. Nicked chairs formed a ring where pride went to limp. Ryan Cole said, "You can leave with your teeth if you listen." The man spat a word that wanted consequences. Maya Reed stepped closer and caught his wrist with surgeon precision, and let the air do the talking. She whispered nothing, and the silence grew teeth. The crowd decided they were not amateurs, and backed up a polite inch. The broker nodded, as if adding their names to a ledger that never aces. Ryan helped the man up because mercy looks good on a wolf. The door sighed and the test turned into trust with a limp. The gallery fundraiser wore charity like perfume and hid business in back rooms. Ava Morrow smiled for cameras that knew how to forget. A quartet murmured a song that made wealth sound innocent. Maya Reed said, "Your security leaks at the door with the gold hinge." Ava Morrow said, "And you are the hinge whisperer." Their eyes measured each other for damage and motive. Ryan Cole scanned donors and caught a suit texting a number that mattered. Ava said, "People collect paintings because they bleed slower than men." Maya said, "Some frames hold secrets better than vaults." A server drifted by and left a card with a time and a street. The chandelier glittered like a lie that learned to dance. They did not toast because toasts are for endings. Nick Russo arrived like a verdict in a dark peacoat that fit his scar. He circled the Carter story the way wolves test fences. Nick Russo said everyone wants in until doors lock from the inside. Ryan Cole said, "We carry keys and shovels." Maya Reed watched his hands and saw a man who never wasted motion. He tossed a set of van keys and a route that looked simple until you read the corners. Nick said, "No lights, no drama, no surprises." Maya said, "Surprises are for birthdays." He tried not to smile and failed by a millimeter. The lights clicked on and the blocks turned to chess. Nick walked away but left his shadow with them. The van hummed like a secret, and the city leaned in to listen. Ryan Cole drove with a calm that made chaos nervous. Maya Reed counted taillights and timed every red like a heartbeat. A motorcycle ghosted them and then vanished into drizzle. Ryan said, "We have a shadow that knows etiquette." Maya said, "Then it is family." They slid under the freeway where voices echo into doubt. A patrol car idled on a ramp and looked bored on purpose. They reached the drop and found only an orange cone and a camera eye. Maya said, "They film trust now." Ryan said, "Smile for the wolves." He parked square and lifted the duffel, and the silence applauded their not flinching. The raid hit the wrong door at dawn, and the street inhaled fear like smoke. Ryan Cole watched tactical armor flood a family's living room and could not move. Maya Reed counted badges and swallowed the scream that wanted out. A child cried, and a television kept talking about weather as if truth were dry. Ryan said, "We did not feed them this address." Maya said, "Someone did and signed our names." A neighbor filmed through blinds, and the city learned a new rumor. The suspect lived 3 blocks away and kept sleeping while shame knocked here. Ryan memorized every face and felt a ledger write his name in red. Maya said, "This is not a mistake, it is a message." Ryan said, "Then we answer with silence they can hear." The sun rose and hated what it saw. The safe house burned with the manners of a funeral that hated flowers. Charred drywall wept black tears down to a mattress spring crown. Maya Reed sifted ash with a pen and found the melted shape of her last promise. Ryan Cole said, "They knew where you sleep when you are brave." Maya said, "I sleep in the job until it kills snoring." Captain Diane Hart stepped through the doorway and held her breath like a witness. Hart, said relocate, and keep buying time with nerves. Maya said, time is counterfeit if the mint is dirty. A neighbor's dog barked at the smoke, and then at nothing. Ryan stared at the burned door, and saw a map of exits closing. Hart said, we are close enough to draw blood by stepping forward. Maya said, then step quiet and step hard. The prison infirmary smelled like bleach practicing cruelty. Ethan Cole lay bandaged and proud enough to pretend it did not hurt. Ryan Cole stood behind glass because rules love distance when families bleed. Ethan said, tell them I have more teeth than they think. Ryan said, I will tell them you bite back in their sleep. A nurse checked vitals and left the room with her eyes lowered. Maya Reed said, this is a tax for getting close. Ryan said, then I will audit them with interest. Ethan smiled, and the smile limped. A guard shifted and looked away as if mercy could be polite. Ryan pressed his hand to the glass, and the cold argued back. Maya said, we end this before winter. Ryan said, winter started today. The bus station locker yawned like a joke that got mean. The envelope should have been a river of bills and a road to trust. It was air and a receipt for humiliation. Maya Reed said, camera, above us is blind by design. Ryan Cole said, blind eyes still watch. He lifted the metal lip and found a smear of graphite that meant gloves. Footsteps passed with suitcase rhythms, and none belonged to help. Ryan said the money was gone, and the loyalty was gone. Maya said, now all you have is the gun and a mirror. He closed the door, and it echoed like laughter. Their handler's number rang and then behaved like a wall. The city clock clicked and called them late to their own survival. The pickup moved to a warehouse where echoes practiced murder. Nick Russo met them with a ledger face and a storm under his collar. Nick Russo said, if someone stole our trust, they steal it from me first. Ryan Cole said, then let us help you count what hurts. A truck backed to the dock, and the driver watched nothing. The first crate opened to show bricks that were lighter than money. Maya Reed said, plaster, and a promise to laugh later. Shots cracked from the catwalk, and the promise arrived early. Ryan dragged Maya behind a forklift, and the metal sang. Nick fired twice and silence ducked. He shouted, move the real load to the south door. Ryan said, we will cover and pretend we like you. The night applauded because chaos played its song on time. Night turned the captain's office into a courtroom with no jury. Ryan Cole opened the safe log and found pages missing where the raid plan should live. Maya Reed traced staple scars and felt the outline of a theft. Ryan said, the gap is not sloppy, it is surgical. Maya said, someone pried the bones from the file. The desk drawer held a burner receipt with the ink still warm. A memo flagged the wrong address and wore Hart's initials like a forgery that practiced. Ryan said, we did not leak the door. Maya said, the door leaked us. Down the hall a copier groaned like a tired liar. The board showed arrows that no longer pointed to truth. Ryan felt a tide rising inside the badge he still believed in. Maya closed the safe, and the click sounded like a verdict. The air smelled like coffee and smoke and betrayal. The city outside kept moving because it loves a crowd at a fall. The parking garage held secrets in concrete and exhaust. Captain Diane Hart waited where cameras blinked and never recorded. Hart said, you think I cut your rope? Ryan Cole said, you braided it for our necks. Hart's stare carried 10 funerals and 1 career she could not bury. Hart said internal affairs would have fed you to wolves for a rumor I killed years ago. Maya Reed said, who owns the rumor now? Hart said Vincent kept the file and made me pay in inches. Ryan said, you sold inches of us. Hart stepped closer and lowered her voice to a blade. Hart said, I kept you alive long enough to reach him. Maya said, you kept us alive long enough to burn us on cue. Tires hissed and a siren grazed the ramp. Hart said, Walk away or I sign your names on a bullet. The echo swallowed the choice and spat back war. The church stood open like a throat that learned to whisper. Ava Morrow lit a candle and watched the flame argue with the draft. Maya Reed stepped into the pew and kept her hands visible. Ava Morrow said, "You brought the storm into my house." Maya said, "Your house leased it to survive." Stained glass painted bruises across their faces. Ava said, "Heart bleeds for my father because he owns her past." Maya said, "And you knew and stayed quiet." Ava looked toward the nave where a boy's laughter used to run. Ava said, "My little brother breathes because I do not speak." Maya said, "Silence buys days and sells souls." The candle guttered and refused to die. Ava said, "I can give you a door that Vincent forgets to lock." Maya said, "Doors are traps when you walk proud." Ava's smile was careful and tired. The choir loft held dust and one last prayer that would not help. The closed bar smelled like bleach and apologies. Nick Russo waited in the dark with a glass he did not drink. Nick Russo said, "I knew the eyes before the cover name." Ryan Cole said, "Say it out loud and end it." Nick touched his collar where the scar hid its sermon. Nick said, "A fire in a warehouse and a voice on the radio that promised a door." Ryan said, "I pulled a kid and the clock killed the rest." Nick's laugh was a cut that never healed. Nick said, "He was not after money, he was after me." Ryan said, "Then you found me." Maya Reed stood between men who owed the past too much. Nick said, "I hate rats more than ghosts." Ryan said, "Heart is both." Glass clinked and did not break. Nick said, "Beat Vincent and I decide if you keep breathing." The bar neon blinked like a dying truth and approved the deal. The plan was a trap shaped like mercy. Ryan Cole and Maya Reed wrote a canary code into a shipment note and let it fly. The leak pecked it clean within an hour. Captain Diane Hart texted a meeting site with the polish of a confession that did not use words. Ryan said, "She will expect a plea." Maya said, "She will get a mirror." Nick Russo agreed to patrol the shadows for wolves that wore badges. Ava Morrow slipped them a layout of Vincent's favorite chapel for truces that rarely stayed holy. Ryan loaded a magazine and felt the weight of promises that fail. Maya folded a last note to herself that read, "Do not look away." The city tuned its lights to funeral. The rain checked the locks. They stepped into a night that would count every breath and every lie. The devil they missed had taken a seat at the head of the table. The chapel wore rain on its stone like old armor and invited a truce that lied. Ryan Cole walked in, wearing the same suit he killed his father in and kept breathing. Maya Reed scanned pews and candles and counted angles that could murder. Ava Morrow waited near the altar and held her fear like a fragile glass. Ava Morrow said, "Vincent wants peace that costs your names." Maya Reed said, "Peace that bills in blood is a receipt for war." Ryan Cole said, "We meet him, and we do not kneel." A choir of empty chairs stared at them and learned nothing. The candles hissed when the door opened, and the knight walked inside. Footsteps spread across stone like ice cracking on a river. Ryan Cole said, "No sudden moves unless they are perfect." The city held its breath outside, and the rain agreed to keep secrets. Captain Diane Hart stepped from the vestry with a face that had already decided. Captain Diane Hart said, "You broke the board so I can break the king." Maya Reed said, "You sold the board and rented our lungs." Ryan Cole watched her hands and saw a pistol that wanted to be a pen. Hart said, "Vincent owns my past and he priced your future high." Ryan Cole said, "He priced yours payable on sight." Ava Morrow stared at the floor as if it could forgive her silence. Hart said, "Drop the cover or I drop you." Maya Reed said, "You do not get to write our ending." Rain rattled the stained glass like coins in a tin. Ryan Cole said, "Walk away and live like someone else." Hart stepped closer and a shadow answered for her with a click. "Hi. Don Vincent Morrow, entered with guards who moved like bad weather. Don Vincent Morrow said, "Family sits or family bleeds." Ryan Cole said, "We stand because we count." Maya Reed tracked the guard on the left and the corner camera that blinked. Ava Morrow said, "He will burn the altar before he loses the room." Vincent smiled, and the gold on his ring flashed like a siren. The first shot came from the balcony where confession hides. Pews splintered and prayer books jumped like startled birds. Ryan Cole dragged Ava down as a statue chipped a cold cheek. Maya Reed returned fire and wrote her answer on the catwalk. Vincent shouted orders that turned air into knives. The candles guttered and then roared back like stubborn saints. Nick Russo burst through the south transept with a choice on his face. Nick Russo said, "Pick a side and let it hurt right." Ryan Cole said, "Make it hurt for the man who forgot loyalty has teeth." Nick put 2 shots into the balcony and threw the keys of the back door. And Maya Reed said, "We pushed the sacristy and cut the head off clean." Don Vincent Morrow said, "I raised you wolves and you came back civilized." Nick Russo said, "I came back hungry." Ava Morrow crawled toward the side aisle and did not fall. Ryan Cole moved with a calm that made chaos misfire. The smoke thickened and turned colors into war. Footsteps hammered the stone like a verdict. The south door yawned and dared them to try living. The sacristy felt small enough to bury 3 lives and 1 name. Don Vincent Morrow stood by a safe and a crucifix that had heard worse prayers. Don Vincent Morrow said, "Blood writes the contract you came to break." Maya Reed said, then signed the last page. Captain Diane Hart staggered in with a wound that spelled confession. Hart said, "I was supposed to finish you, and I missed on purpose." Ryan Cole said, "You missed the day you chose him." Nick Russo held the door and counted steps that might be their last. Vincent reached for the safe, and the room chose. Maya Reed fired once, and the ring hit stone like a bell. Ava Morrow said, "It is done." Sirens approached, and the rain remembered their names. The candles outside kept burning, because someone had to. Sirens chewed the rain, while the cathedral exhaled gun smoke and prayer. Don Vincent Morrow lay still beneath a crucifix that had heard worse bargains. Captain Diane Hart bled on a gurney and stared at ceilings she once commanded. Captain Diane Hart said, "Make it count before they rewrite it." FBI agent Maya Reed said, "We already wrote it in stone." Detective Ryan Cole sealed the ledger in a bag and felt the weight bite back. Ava Morrow watched an evidence tech lift the gold ring and history lost its shine. Ava Morrow said, "He taught me to count money, not days." Maya Reed said, "Days are the only currency that stays spent." Nick Russo hovered at the transept door with a shadow that did favors. Nick Russo said, "We never met, and I was never hungry." Detective Ryan Cole said, "Stay gone, or stay loyal." The paramedics rolled, and the night closed around what it could not forgive. The brief room glared like a confession booth with bad manners. A recorder blinked and promised to forget nothing. Detective Ryan Cole said, "We recovered the ledger and the safe footage." FBI agent Maya Reed said, "Hart coordinated leaks under duress from Vincent." A lawyer cleared his throat, as if truth were a splinter. Investigator said, "List all civilian assets." Maya Reed said Ava Morrow cooperated at risk to a minor. Detective Ryan Cole said, "Exclude her and charge me for the ink." The clock ticked like a metronome for liars. Another question tried to taste Nick Russo, and missed. Maya Reed said, "Our source is gone, and stays gone." Detective Ryan Cole signed his name, and felt letters turn into scars. The recorder clicked off, and the room kept judging anyway. The prison gate opened like a stubborn jaw finally pried. Ethan Cole stepped out with a limp smile, and a duffel that had seen better years. Ethan Cole said, "Feels like the air learned my name again." Detective Ryan Cole said, "It kept practicing while you slept." They stood too long, and then remembered how to hug. A guard lit a cigarette and pretended not to watch freedom happen. FBI agent Maya Reed waited by the car and held space like a steady hand. Maya Reed said, "Paperwork is a maze, but the exit is real." Ethan Cole said, "You look tired enough to scare sleep." Detective Ryan Cole said, "Sleep owes me interest." A bus rumbled past and sprayed dust on yesterday. The sky felt wider than justice and just as cold. The ferry pulled from the pier like a page tearing clean. Ava Morrow stood at the rail with a small suitcase and a promise not to look back. A boy leaned on her coat and watched gulls cut the wind. Ava Morrow said, "Count days, not debts." FBI agent Maya Reed said, "Live quiet and live long." Ava nodded and let the city shrink into weather and lights. She kept no keepsakes except a name she would not answer. Detective Ryan Cole said, "If anyone asks, we were ghosts." Ava Morrow said, "Then haunt kindly." The horn bellowed and the harbor folded over their words. The rain softened to mist and left room for breathing. The wake wrote a white line that the water kept erasing. Night thinned over a quiet apartment where medals slept in a drawer. Detective Ryan Cole hung the dark suit that remembered too much and opened a window to let the sirens pass. The ledger sat sealed on a shelf like a trapped storm. FBI agent Maya Reed's commendation letter waited on her kitchen table beside a cold cup. Maya Reed said, "We finish the report and we start forgetting." Detective Ryan Cole said, "Forgetting is a job that pays in ghosts." The phone buzzed once with a number that did not want an answer. He killed the light, and the city answered with 1,000 more. Maya Reed looked at the empty chair and accepted its honesty. Detective Ryan Cole said, "There is no retirement plan for ghosts." The room kept the secret, and the night kept the room.